Just a few practical tips for how you manage people in your workforce who may not be your star performers. This is a problem most business owners face at some point or another. You've got to know how to manage the troubling employees or the bad employees. Very quickly, here are my top tips for that. Number one, write down the problem. Write it down every time you counsel the employee. Take it to the employee. Tell them what steps they need to take to improve. Tell the employee what will happen if their performance does not improve. And then make a note of that conversation with the date, who was there, and enough information that you can show that this is exactly what happened and I documented it. That can be very valuable. Be very specific about what behavior is the problem. Be very specific about where the employee needs to improve. And again, focus on their behavior, not their characteristics. Focus on the fact that they are not showing up for work or they're coming in late, not on the fact that they've been home caring for an ill family member. And above all, tell the employee what to expect if things don't change. The agencies to which employees can complain or make legal claims always want to know whether you told the employee what the result was going to be. So you have to have that difficult conversation with people. You have to tell them, look, if you're not here with perfect attendance over the next 2 months, I'm going to have to fire you. I can't have an employee who's not coming to work reliably, or whatever your situation is. But have that conversation calmly, plainly, and tell them what you need as their employer. If your counseling doesn't work and it's just simply time for a change, then here are a few pointers when you're terminating an employee. And this is a situation that takes a tremendous amount of care if you want to limit your exposure to legal claims like wrongful termination. Consider having a witness with you when you do this. You don't want it to be a hostile or intimidating environment, but consider having someone sit in person or at least on the phone so that there are two of you on the business owner's side to explain how the conversation went, what was said, and what happened. 2 is give a reason to the employee and give a valid, understandable reason. For example, you've not been making your sales. You haven't hit your quota for the last 3 months. In February, you only went on 2 sales calls when our standard expectation is 10. Be very specific. That way your employee, even though they may be extremely unhappy about being terminated, they're not left guessing as to what the reasons were. And often when employees are left to guess, they fill in the blank with a discriminatory motive. So tell them what the issue was and why they're being let go. And this shouldn't be a surprise to them if you've been doing your counseling along the way, as we discussed. And last, don't make promises that you'll end up regretting later. Many business owners feel bad about terminating someone, so they offer to give references or they offer to call the person if another position comes up. Don't make those promises unless you sincerely mean it, because then when you don't follow through with those items, an employee can come back and use that as evidence that you really had some other motive in mind. Keep in mind that if you do terminate someone and then replace them, there are a few areas to think about. One is, who will that replacement be? Now, you can't always help who the replacement person is. You are looking for the best qualified replacement that you find in the market at the time. If you're facing a charge of discrimination, it is much better if you have hired someone who is of a similar category to the person you let go. For example, if you just terminated someone who was African American, if they're replaced by someone who's also African American, The chance for a successful discrimination claim based on race dramatically drops in my experience. If EEOC learns that the replacement was from the exact same protected category as the person who was let go, it really takes some of the validity out of the person's claim. It's not saying that that's an absolute win for a business owner, but it certainly helps. Think about how you'll handle reference calls. If this person has a prospective employer call you for a reference and you really have nothing good to say, I strongly advise you just say, we don't provide references, rather than tell every horrible experience you had with this employee, because you could be putting yourself at risk of a defamation claim there. And by all means, if you have written policies about termination, follow those policies. If your company has set out a process for counseling or human resources advice before a termination occurs, follow those policies. There's not much worse than having a written policy and just not following it. On slide number 15, I just mentioned some of the areas that you will be confronted with when you have a termination. One is unemployment compensation, 2 is vacation pay, and 3 is sick pay. And many business owners wonder if they're obligated to pay vacation and sick pay, and the good news is it almost completely depends on what's in your written policy. So that's another reason to have these areas covered in your policy manual.